Well, guys, I done goofed. So I'm assuming you guys know where I'm going with this, so if you guys haven't looked at the stock market today, Nvidia is down roughly 20%. Now, Nvidia tanked mainly because of their last earnings report, their future guidance, and kind of the overall sentiment that investors now have with the CEO and kind of the management team on how they handled this and how they handled their PR leading up to this earnings report. So in this video, I'm going to be going over exactly what was covered in the quarter, my overall takeaway from it, and then where I goofed when I thought about investing in the company. And you guys know, if you followed the channel, I did start a small position of my eventual large Nvidia position not too long ago when the stock dipped the first time with the overall market. And as someone who is newly invested to Nvidia, I'm a little upset, and I'm one, annoyed with myself because I should have seen this coming, and two, I'm upset because I feel slightly betrayed from the CEO. So I'm going to be going over all of that and kind of giving my outlook for the company. So if you guys are interested in that, make sure to stick around, hit that like button, and let's jump into the video. So first things first, I'm going to be going over exactly what happened with Nvidia in this earnings report. Now, as a standalone quarter is what has just happened, it all in all wasn't that bad. It wasn't really great, but it did not deserve a 20% haircut of the stock's value. But the guidance and then kind of the overall sentiment that people now have towards the CEO after the remarks he was giving, I can understand exactly why investors would pull out so much money of Nvidia and why they now have dropped the majority of their price targets. And so let's go into the positives first. So first things first, data center market share is up roughly 48% year over year. So this means that Nvidia is pretty much in the majority of the world's supercomputers and is now leading the frontier as far as AI and breaking down hard algorithms for all these data centers and really pretty much taking its rightful place as being the #1 GPU used by most data centers, as I'm pretty sure we all saw coming. And so that growth is amazing, and being able to maintain that market share for years to come, I think is doable with the company. And I do think that with all the things that are going on right now, it'll look rocky, but I definitely think that we cannot take away the amount of impact that Nvidia has in the data center market. The next key point to look at is that Nvidia's revenue growth was about 21% year over year. And while this is pretty substantial, and especially for any company Nvidia's size, that is an amazing number to be able to grow your revenue by, analysts and myself included and other shareholders were definitely expecting a little bit more. I was hoping that it was going to beat revenue estimates, and somewhere in between the 25 to 27 range would have been right on par with what I wanted for the company. Coming in at 21 definitely was a little bit of letdown. I don't think it was too big of a deal, but I would have definitely liked to see that number higher. Now, the last pro, I guess you can say, for the company is that Nvidia did increase its net income by roughly 50% year over year. And for a company of Nvidia's size, and especially that Nvidia's been in such a growth mode over the past few years, increasing net income by about 50% is great. And it's really improvement on the company's longevity, because this means that management is not only focused on just growth, but it's also focused on, say, operations and margins going forward. And they're definitely not just trying to be like, a one-trick pony with like, yes, we can be in everything, even though we're not making much money. Now they're definitely focused on, say, turning from not so much of an accelerating growth, and now they're just accelerating profitability. So I guess you can't be too upset with that, and I guess it is the silver lining to this overall earnings report. But I'm about to get into the negatives, and I'm going to be breaking through the negatives that I thought were most important and kind of what all of Wall Street thought were most important, and I'm going to be giving my take on that. Now, if you're just reading headlines and you just saw Nvidia's earnings when they came out, they looked like they beat estimates by a small percentage. However, when you look at the adjusted earnings and that people were pretty much banking on Nvidia continuing to beat, they actually missed by about 5%. Now, again, a miss of earnings of about 5% for a company like Nvidia when analysts were already expecting, top-of-the-line performance, in my opinion, isn't a big deal. Now, obviously, you can have a tech company that, it has 1 or 2 quarters of mishaps, and analysts, they just expect too much out of the company, and that's completely fine. And me as a shareholder, I do not care about the earnings miss of this quarter. What I care about is the next point, is that they lowered guidance for next year by roughly 20% of what was kind of the incentive going into this quarter. Now, that is largely due to the fact that I'll kind of get into a little bit, was that management really either didn't acknowledge or didn't understand of how big of an impact cryptocurrency had into the market. And now, as you all know, cryptocurrency is no longer the hype train that it was. And so now they're definitely seeing a restriction on their revenue and also their unit sales. They have inventory backup. And the fact that, a company like Nvidia that has been priced to perfection as far as growth goes, it only recently became in my opinion, somewhat of a reasonable value for the growth that was projected, just recently with chopping about 20% off of the company a couple weeks ago. But now with lowering that growth expectations, for the next years, and then possibly, if anybody has any pessimism in the next 3 years of, say, the overall market scheme, this is definitely very alarming. And now, in my opinion, no longer justifies the premium that Nvidia is currently trading for. And Nvidia is going to have to come down even more in value to kind of justify that lower guidance. And that's the main reason why you can kind of see that the market sold off Nvidia, because now slowing down its earnings after years and years of explosive earnings, slowing down that growth just did not make any sense as far as like why it had its valuation anymore. And so I expect the stock is going to continue to get hammered until people pretty much price in an accurate, about 1.5 PEG going forward. So that's definitely going to be the thing that's going to hurt the stock the majority of the time. Who knows? It could be like every other semiconductor that is expecting to really revamp in the second half of 2019. But for right now, Nvidia does not really justify its premium that it's trading for right now, and that's the main reason why it's sold off so substantially. Now, most of you know that, and most of you understand that, okay, slowing down growth, especially when you're a company like Nvidia, is going to lead to a lot of, bloodshed as far as the stock value. But the biggest thing that upset me, because definitely I've spoken about it on this channel a lot, that semis and tech are going to be slowing down at minimum until the second half of next year. So I still wasn't really too shocked with this. The thing that I was shocked about was the CEO's explanation as to why it's going to be slowing down and how much of a play cryptocurrency came into their revenue. And this is mainly because over the past few quarters, Nvidia's CEO and their management team has talked about that when the crypto boom was happening, it was a negligible percentage of their revenue. Now, me, and if you followed along when I was talking about AMD, I definitely thought AMD's revenue was getting spiked up because of cryptocurrency, because mainly if you look at anybody that was mining cryptocurrency, AMD's cards were much more effective per dollar value at mining any coin that wasn't, say, Bitcoin. So I definitely thought that the majority of AMD's cards going out of stock were directly due to cryptocurrencies. But because Nvidia had so much growth in, say, its data center, I was giving Nvidia the benefit of the doubt, and I was agreeing with the CEO that, okay, the majority of their inflated revenue definitely has to be from, there's going to be some from cryptocurrency, but the majority of it is because data centers are exploding. A lot of companies were using NVIDIA's GPUs for their autonomous driving. Up until recently, you had Tesla, you had Volvo, you had Toyota, and a couple of other major manufacturers. And so I was giving NVIDIA the benefit of the doubt and agreeing with their CEO that, okay, cryptocurrency didn't have this so much of an impact. But now, miraculously, the CEO and the CFO are kind of talking about how the crypto boom crippled the company's revenue much more than they anticipated. And this upset me because the CEO realistically lied about his perception. He didn't necessarily have to lie, but that either means one of two things. He either did lie to shareholders' faces over the past couple of quarters with kind of shrugging off the impact of crypto, or the CEO actually doesn't have any reason to understand where that revenue is coming from and why they're selling out of their inventory. Now, I still want to point out that I'm definitely not upset with NVIDIA's earnings report because of their guidance weakening. I have said about it many times on this channel that I think the majority of tech stocks, and especially semiconductors, are going to be slowing at minimum at least to the second half of 2019. So I'm definitely not upset with the company saying that, okay, we're not going to be growing as fast as we were, for the next couple of quarters, possibly the majority of the year. That wasn't the big, irking thing from this earnings report. The big thing that I am very uncomfortable with is the fact that the CEO and the rest of the management team completely neglected to inform investors of the past couple of quarters of how much cryptocurrency impacted their revenue. Now, for the last few quarters, the CEO has kind of shrugged off, any role that cryptocurrency was playing into their, their demand for their graphics cards. And in my mind, because, if you pay attention to crypto mining, the majority of people were looking for AMD's cards because for any coin other than Bitcoin, and AMD's GPUs just, were much better at breaking down the algorithms than NVIDIA's were on a dollar cost basis. So I actually kind of was giving them the benefit of the doubt and saying, okay, all of these other growth sectors that are growing for NVIDIA, it makes sense. It might just be all the other sectors that are really accelerating right now. And so I was agreeing with the CEO that, okay, cryptocurrency probably, I was assuming had about a 5 to 10% of their revenue increase. And I did not think it was the majority of the revenue increase over the past couple of quarters. And the CEO just kind of explained like, oh, well, I didn't realize that it was that big of a deal. And To me, when the leader of the company does either one, not disclose that yes, cryptocurrency is boosting up our numbers and you should be aware of that, or two, the CEO doesn't have any idea as to why they're selling out so much, and he's pretty much disconnected with operations and exactly where, these cards are being sold to. That makes me really upset as a shareholder. Not enough to sell the stock, but it definitely makes me hesitant to buy more. And I'm going to be getting into that in a little bit and really explaining where I went wrong with my thought process. But this is definitely something that I do not take lightly, and I'm very upset with pretty much the overall quarter, but I'm definitely upset with the CEO, and kind of this makes me feel weird about being invested in Nvidia when the company's leader just didn't want to disclose or didn't have the ability to disclose how much cryptocurrency actually affected their bottom line. And now that the recap's over, I want to go over exactly why I was stupid with this investment and why I started way too early with my Nvidia position. And while granted it wasn't the full position I was, expecting to make, I definitely blame myself for jumping in too early, and I'm going to be going through exactly what my thought process was along the way and where I went wrong. And I'm kind of documenting this because I want other people to be able to learn from my mistake, and I also want to kind of just put it out there as a way of being transparent, and it will also let me, kind of humiliate myself to the point where I remind myself in the future to not fall for this same trap again. Now, again, you guys know that I'm relatively new to the stock market, but I know a lot of you are even newer than I am to the stock market. And this is something that I definitely will not let myself get trapped up again, but this is something that if you haven't really fell, victim to yet, I highly, highly suggest that you, every time that you find yourself getting into this trap, that you take a step back and really think about okay, does this actually seem like it's going to happen? So let me go into it. Now, my first mistake I want to point out is that I definitely saw this coming. So, if you guys have been around and you've been looking, especially at my Micron videos, when I gave a breakdown of what happened with Micron's earnings report and kind of what guidance they were giving to the overall semiconductor market, a lot of insight came out of that, and I was able to say that, okay, AMD is going to have a lot of issues because obviously AMD isn't picking up the slack because they wouldn't have a CPU shortage if AMD was getting that market share. So I predicted what was going to happen. Predicted, quote unquote, obviously, that was my assumption, that AMD was going to, not take all that market share that analysts were expecting. I definitely saw that because Intel was, having all these issues, that there was going to be a slowdown. And all of this kind of breaks down is that semiconductors relate to one another. All semiconductors, especially when they're different semiconductors, say, within a computer, all of them can foreshadow what the other ones are going to be doing. And now in Micron's earnings report, and I believe I actually pointed out this in my breakdown of that in that video, was that Micron talked about one buyer that was having an abnormally lower demand than they normally do. And I was kind of hypothesizing, and I think I put it in that video. I'm not entirely sure. If I didn't, obviously you can't trust me on that, but what I did think was that, okay, there's a couple of companies that I definitely know are big buyers of Micron's RAM. And now one of them would have been Apple, but Apple didn't disclose, at least until after their phone came out, that they were going to be using Micron in that phone. Now, Micron wasn't used in the previous iPhone. I believe the last one that they were used in was the iPhone 6. So I was assuming that because of the whole shortage right now, Micron was going to be in the iPhone, but I didn't believe that that was the expected buyer that they were kind of, missing out a lot of revenue from. So the only other company that I could really think of that would be the one bulk buyer that, they routinely have that didn't say just create a data center so they weren't banking on that revenue would be Nvidia. Now that's because for the past few generations of graphics cards, Nvidia has only used Micron's GDDR. And now GDDR is like DRAM, but it's a different module, and so Micron also produces it. It's actually more lucrative for them to be selling it to Nvidia. But Nvidia would have was the only company that made sense as to who was that mysterious company that was lowering the amount of units that they were going to be buying. Because if you look at AMD, AMD doesn't use Micron's RAM. So obviously it was Nvidia. And I was assuming that, okay, either I was wrong or I blew that out of proportion. I was thinking one of those was going on, and it was mainly because I wanted Nvidia to, kind of be on the up and up. I thought that Nvidia, they were going to, have enough demand with their brand new turning architecture. I thought that the fact that they were opening up a brand new industry with the special effects market, that I kind of overlooked that assumption that I was making from Micron's earnings report. And I'm going to only relate that to greed. I knew fully well that this was a possibility. But because of all the other shiny things that Nvidia was talking about in their previous earnings report, I just gave Nvidia the benefit of the doubt, and I assumed that they were going to be fine and their demand was going to be normal, and their demand for their cards subsequently were going to be normal. Because if Nvidia obviously wasn't buying a lot of RAM from Micron, obviously they weren't expecting to sell that many units as they had anticipated. So whether that is actually true or not, I totally had that assumption, and it may or may not be true. It might be a completely different buyer. That was the one that, completely cut all of their guidance for how much units they were going to buy, at least in the short term. But that's just kind of what I'm seeing here. And I'm going to be blaming why I didn't, trust my gut on that with greed. It's pretty much it. And so greed, obviously one of the worst emotions you can have in the stock market. And me as of late, when I've had really good returns and been right a lot of the times, I have noticed myself getting much more greedy and, falling into hubris with thinking that, okay, I've done enough research, it's worked out so many times, and having that mentality in a bull market is a horrible idea, and I'm kicking myself for it now. You should always assume that you're wrong and just minimize your downside when you are. But that's something for all of you, especially if you've been riding growth stocks or momentum stocks for the past few years, and you just assume every, thought that you've had with this company because it's gone up was correct. Don't believe that. Even if it's right, don't believe it. Every great investor of all time has always talked about that anytime they buy it, they always second guess themselves and think, okay, was I the idiot that bought an overvalued company, or was I smart to, buy it from an idiot that thought it was overvalued? So definitely take a step back and really assume that you know what you're doing. So that was the first point. Now, the next mistake I want to call myself on is that I trusted the CEO and other analysts over my own intuition. Now, this is directly in relation to why I was so distraught when the earnings report came out and the CEO was talking about how much of an impact cryptocurrency actually had on the company's revenue. Now, obviously, cryptocurrency, I should have just accepted the fact that, okay, the CEO is going to try to say that, okay, no, this is just our company being amazing. Cryptocurrency isn't really that big of a deal. But when you looked at the actual marketplace, every graphics card was getting bought up. Every graphics card was, getting retailed 2 or 3 times what it was going for from the manufacturer. And that was just because, yes, everybody was using, say, AMD's cards first for the best dollar performance. But when AMD's cards got sold out, AMD doesn't have the type of supply chain that Nvidia has. So obviously Nvidia's cards were going to get continuously bought out by crypto miners. I knew that, but in my head, because the CEO kept downplaying the impact of cryptocurrency, and because analysts continued to kind of echo that thought that, okay, yeah, cryptocurrency is having an impact, but it's just a bump in the road. It's just a small bump to the revenue. It's not going to be that important, once it dies down, and everything will just be, hunky-dory. So the emotion that I kind of let go into was self-doubt. So I had these feelings, but because the CEO and so many analysts were talking about that, okay, that's not actually a big deal, I believed them over my gut intuition. And with investing, that is the worst possible thing you can do, is to let other people dictate your mind for you. Now, whether you're completely wrong, if it's your conclusion that you came to and your conclusion was wrong, but it was your standalone, nothing influenced you to bring you to that conclusion, that's just the nature of the game. Peter Lynch, one of the most successful fund managers in history, said that if you're right 6 out of 10 times, you are one of the best stock pickers you can ever be. So you definitely won't be right 100% of the time. And I'm not expecting that I'm going to be right 100% of the time. I'm hoping that I'm right about 60-ish% of the time. But I let my conclusion play second fiddle to what the CEO and other analysts were saying. And that is something you just cannot do when you're an individual stock picker. And so I let doubt pretty much come into my position and maybe just assume that I was wrong and that I should trust what the CEO and analysts are saying, which is something, again, just don't do, especially if you're new to the stock market and you're just assuming that because so many analysts are bullish on the company, you should be bullish on the company. Odds are, if everybody's bullish on something, it's too good to be true. Now, the last thing I want to address as to my last mistake that I made was that I assumed that when Micron came out with their earnings and gave that foreshadowing as to, okay, this is what's going to be happening in the semiconductor space, when AMD came out and, they had a GPU issue and they tanked and everybody thought that, okay, because cryptocurrency, AMD's GPU sales were going to plummet, and they did. once all of that happened and the whole semiconductor market pretty much took a hit, because almost every time that a major semiconductor, misses something or gives bad guidance, the whole industry kind of takes a dip. Now, I assumed that because all of this information was out there, that even if I was right or wrong with these two things, that the rest of the market would price it in. I assumed that because that public information was there, with what happened with a major competitor of Nvidia, that people would just automatically price in, okay, what happens if this was with Nvidia? Cool. If it doesn't happen, we'll buy back in. But since it is a possibility, we're going to drop the price according to, what is the worst case scenario. And that is just laziness. I was so lazy because I did not take the time to actually break out the math and be like, okay, if this much of AMD's revenue was impacted because of cryptocurrency, what is a ballpark range that Nvidia's revenue could get impacted because of this? And you probably would have come out to a fairly accurate number to what was actually released. So those are the 3 points that I am just completely blaming myself for as to why I jumped too early in the stock. Now, I definitely think Nvidia is going to be an amazing company in the future. I am not selling my position sorry. Now, I definitely think Nvidia is an amazing company, and I think they're going to be doing amazing things over the next 5-10 years. So I am not selling my shares currently with Nvidia. I definitely still believe in the company, and I think they have years of growth ahead of them. However, I am not buying any more shares until, with a new growth model, with what they're expected to do over the next few years, drops their PEG ratio to a reasonable level. Because their PEG ratio barely became reasonable, and I was kind of like fudging the numbers for, I was accepting a higher PEG ratio than I really should be because I believed so much in the company. And so now I'm definitely going to only buy into Nvidia again when I definitely have a margin of safety. The company has a great balance sheet, so the company is executing well. Again, their net income is up. They're executing really well as a company, but they're not growing like everybody was anticipating, myself included. So I'm not going to be buying any more shares off of this dip. However, I'm not selling either because I'm not a bear on the company. I think the company is going to be going through some rough time, and I think the stock is going to get punished because of that. But that one doesn't mean that I want to sell out of the company. I do want to own Nvidia. I think Nvidia will be great in the future. I think Nvidia is still hands down the best GPU manufacturer in the world, and AMD has not come even close to it, especially with their release of the 590. I love the company, but it's going to be pretty rocky, and I'm not adding to my position until there is like a groundbreaking sale. And I think the company can shell out another 15% or so until it has a margin of safety that I'm comfortable with. So that is it for this video. It is pretty long, and so thank you guys for sticking with me if you stuck to the very end. Let me know what you guys thought in the comment section down below. Like, what were your reactions to the earnings report? And thank you for watching, and if you guys stuck around to the end of the video, please make sure to subscribe and like this video. It helps me out a lot. And so thanks for watching again, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.